Hi everyone. Sorry I'm late. It's not my fault. No, it was definitely my fault, like a little bit. But it's okay. So we're oh, for the first time ever, I can't believe it's the first time ever. This is very embarrassing. Um, but we're gonna have we have closed captions today, you guys. How exciting is this? So first of all, thanks for joining. So excited. Oh, of course, Yvette showed up right away. She has been looking forward to this for so long. But to introduce what we're talking about, so I am so excited to welcome my guest, Tori. You may know her on Twitter or you may know her from her organizing, but in any case, she is a huge advocate for accessibility rights, disability rights, and is here to talk about how we can ensure that not only campaigns are more inclusive and accessible to everyone, but also just in like for content creators and every other facet of our lives that we can make sure that we are making things accessible and knowing to add that to our normal checklist of things to do when we're creating content. So without further ado, um, welcome to Tori.
Hi, can you see me and hear me okay?
Oh, yes, we can see you
Great,
and
awesome.
hear you beautifully.
Um, Perfect. So I am Tori. I use she, her pronouns. I'm going to do a real brief description of what the image is. So I'm a white woman, red hair and black glasses. And I'm sitting in front of two bookcases that are brown and are full of books. And then also over my corner, there's a black and white kitty cat who she
Oh,
probably won't be there for very long. But, oh, sorry. Okay, she's like, no.
oh
She's
my
like, no,
goodness.
I'm good.
She's like, excuse you, ma'am.
Yeah, she's
Oh,
like, I am not here for you. I'm here to look at the door at the birds.
oh my God. So also to everyone, I am Maddy. I am in pigtail buns. I am sitting with a door behind me and another desk behind me and a white wall. And I'm sitting here wearing a large headset with a microphone and a white shirt.
Perfect.
Yay! So,
Perfect.
for those who are like, we know why you're telling us this, not everyone does. So, Tori, explain maybe why we do that.
Yeah, definitely. So it's just doing an image description. So kind of giving folks who either are blind or have low visibility the same like kind of way to understand what those of us who are not blind or don't have low visibility, what we're seeing.
Okay.
So just yeah, it's just a straightforward way to like get the full sense of what's going on. Yeah,
Awesome.
exactly.
Well, I would love to give you a chance to introduce yourself so that our audience knows who they're talking to. So, Tori, who the heck are you?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Tori. I am a cat mom, first and foremost,
Mm,
probably.
love.
Um, we will show off both cats, not just Zora's a little standoffish, so she's like, I don't know about this. So I'm a cat mom. I am disabled. I am more than happy to like talk about what my disabilities are. Some folks are not, and that is okay. I personally, so I have what's called Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. It's a genetic disorder that affects how my joints function.
Mm.
So like, I don't know, sometimes I'll wake up and my like shoulder is fully dislocated and I have to like clonk it back in. I
Jeez.
right. I joke about it a lot. It was kind of funny. There was a day where I was at work and I forgot that my new coworkers like didn't know this about me. And I was like, oh, friends, like I popped two of my vertebrae back into place and I can think now. And they were like, what the fuck? Like, what are you talking about? But one of my coworkers, I've known her for like 2 years. So she was like, she's fine. She's fine. No one freak out. And this is normal.
Oh, wow.
Right. So that's something. And then I also have what's called POTS, so POTS, which stands for something. I actually don't remember what it stands for most of the time.
That's okay. There are a lot
But
of acronyms.
basically what it is that there are so many acronyms. There's so many acronyms. So so not a normal body. So someone without POTS, your blood like it goes down into your legs, and then your veins and muscles are strong enough to pump the blood back up. Sometimes my veins and muscles kind of just don't do that, and so my blood like gets stuck in my legs and does not come back up to my brain, which is not great. And so for those two things, I have a walker that I use. When I used to walk places, I mean, now we don't leave. Yeah. So I have a walker that I use. We actually, my partner and I primarily bought it so that we could use it to vote and then also to go to protests. So, right, it's a great tool for those things. Especially both for it helps with walking and also that I have a spot to sit so that I don't faint.
Yep.
Which I've been lucky to not faint at protests, but I have fainted in many other places.
Oh, geez.
I know. it's what it is. And then I also have PTSD, which like personally for myself, I consider a disability. A lot of people feel differently about their own mental health stuff, and like I would never ever tell anyone how to feel about their own mental health stuff. For me personally, it's one of the things that I consider as making me disabled.
Yeah.
And so that's like the litany of what makes me disabled. I was born with the EDS. The POTS I like developed over time, and then PTSD, of course, like develops because of trauma. And typically when people are like toss out like who you are, like you're like 4 words, I'm a disabled queer survivor are like the big ones. And then I'm also an organizer, so we can like dive in a little bit to what organizing is.
Yeah, and tell me about like some of the campaigns that you've worked for, because you've worked on some pretty impressive campaigns, especially this cycle. I feel like every time I got a job update about Tori, I'm like, oh damn, good for you, girl.
I appreciate that. So I currently work for John Ossoff on the campaign side. I was asked to help with the transition, so my job ends in 3 days.
Oh my goodness.
Which is a little weird. Yeah. But yeah, so I worked for John Ossoff as a distributed organizer. I can talk about what that means more. And I also worked for the Texas Democratic Party as a distributed organizer. And then before that, I was a volunteer with Elizabeth Warren's campaign and a volunteer with Julian Castro's campaign. So both of those were campaigns for president. Right. Yeah. So started as a volunteer for Julian. And pretty quickly, so before I volunteered for Julian, which I started in early 2019, so like right around 2 years ago, I did not know that people could volunteer for campaigns. I knew they had staff, obviously, but like that was the extent of what I knew. But I and my partner both are really politically active, and we were like keeping track, especially how many candidates did it end up being? There were 28 candidates.
I was going to say at one point there were, I think it was funny, Stephen Colbert always would do the like all the photos on the screen of all the people.
Yeah, exactly. My friends and I used to be like, how many of the 28 can we remember, which I'm not going to subject anyone to. But so there are like 28 candidates, and so my partner and I were kind of like, who do we feel good about, who's like has strong progressive policies, who is like has done good work in the past, like kind of where are we looking at? And it was right around when Julian came out in favor of reparations was when I was like, okay, like I'm really interested in this candidate. And a friend of ours started volunteering for Gillibrand, and I was like, how did you do that? How do I do that?
You're like, I want to do that thing.
I know, I want to do it. And before she got back to me, I happened to see a tweet from Julian's national organizing manager that just was like, do you want to volunteer for Juliana Castro? Like, here's how. I had no idea what I was doing, and like happened to join, and the organizer, her name is Lily, was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, anything, as long as I can do it from my computer.
Yep.
Because I was, my health was like okay at that point, but my health fluctuates substantially. Right. And so I was like, as long as I can do it like from my keyboard, like I'm cool. Right. And so really dove in, and like some of the things that organizers do is things like, so like for Texas Democrats, I like was a big part of running the texting program. I'm sure a ton of people saw those tweets of like, remember to like text your girl good morning before Jamie Harrison does, because like that's what we do. Like, we are the people who like run the texting, and so we're making sure that like we're hitting as many people about voting as possible, or about like persuading people about candidates, or talking about issues as possible. So I did that for Texas Democrats. Some of the other organizing stuff is like, so with now Senator Ossoff, which is like the most exciting thing. I know. It feels good. It feels good.
Oh yeah. I mean, it feels good for me. I can't imagine how it must feel for you.
It feels really good. I love saying it. It's so good. I have this, I'm gonna hold up my mug. I have this white mug with a blue Georgia on it, and it says "Win the whole damn thing."
I love it.
It's so good.
That's great. I have my pictures in mirror mode, so you can't like read it, but it's. Oh, I guess it's not the way you're seeing it.
Yeah, it's right for us.
Billionaire tears. I think I have 2 of these mugs, because I was like, well,
amazing.
I have to get one for my partner. Yeah. So my fiance. So I know, very fancy. So talk about talk about like distributed organizer. If someone hears that term, I don't know that everyone would know like what that entails. So I'd love for you to talk about
Totally. Yeah. One of the funny things is that like I've been a distributed organizer for like about a year now, and like I think I know what it entails at this point. It changes a lot, and like also like digital organizing and distributed organizing often like overlap, or like some places will have people who are just called digital organizers, but they're also like doing what distributed organizers would do. So kind of the full gamut, or like to back up one step, there are kind of 2 types of organizing within politics. So there's digital and distributed, which we'll talk about, and then there's also field. Right. Field organizers in a normal time, when there's not a pandemic, are the folks who are on the ground, are knocking doors, are helping volunteers who go out and knock doors, are like connecting people face to face. And then in the last year, there have still been field organizers, but they've more been doing phone banking. And then there are some places that did canvassing. Yep. So that's kind of what the realm of field is, and it's typically very localized. So like if you are a field organizer, you get what's called a turf. So you have an area that is your area. And unless you're a rural organizer, the area is like not particularly large in terms of physical distance. Right. And you are focused on the people within that specific area. Bless you. Partners.
Hi, Garrett.
He waved hi. He's listening and also playing Animal Crossing.
Fun. Well, he should know that right when we started, Yvette was like typing in all caps, of course. Hi, Garrett. Tell him I say hi. So he should know.
He is waving.
I played Animal Crossing every single day up until like sometime in November, and I haven't checked it since then, and I'm worried because I'm just like, I'm gonna have so many weeds.
I know. That's the worst. Back to it after a while. Just today, it's the snow went away, and it's spring now.
Oh,
I
that's
know.
right. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't, so I
Which is
mean,
like,
I don't get weather here in San Francisco. I mean, so San Francisco gets weather. It's just like not the weather you want because
right.
like right now it's very pleasant and lovely. It was like sunny and 55 degrees or something, which was lovely.
Yeah.
But I mean, you would think, oh, great, then the summer, because you're right. I live like a 20-minute walk from the ocean. Yeah,
Nope.
you think like, oh, it's beautiful. I'm like, that's when the name of our
Mm-mm.
fog. I don't know if you've heard this, but it's Carl the Fog. He has it. Carl the Fog has a Twitter. For those of you on Twitter, follow Carl the Fog because he's very sassy. And yeah, like it's called June gloom for a reason here, and it's just because like it's that's when the marine layer comes in because as soon as it starts heating up, that water
right.
like off is like, oh hello. Like, did you think you were having a summer beach party? Like, think again.
Like, no.
Yeah.
Right. Break out those sweaters. It's July.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I swear, because I grew up in the Bay Area, but I grew about 45 minutes south of here. I promise we'll get back to talking to
No, you're
distributed
good.
organizing. But I think my theory is every single person that you see anywhere wearing a sweatshirt or like a fleece that says like one of those things you buy in like a gift shop, a San
Sure.
Francisco one. Every single one of those was bought because the person went up to the city during the day in the summer and didn't realize how cold it was going to be, and then they got there and were like, oh no, and then had to run into the first gift store they could and buy a sweatshirt. I have one that I got from that. Everyone I know does. This is my theory.
That theory is so true. I live in Sacramento now, but I lived in the Bay for 2 years. And when my partner and I very first moved out here, we did a road trip all the way across the country because we lived in Baltimore before.
Oh wow.
And I was like, I cannot wait. It's going to be June. It's going to be warm. We have been in the car for so long. And I got out of the car and I was like, buy me a goddamn sweater.
Right?
There happened to be an H&M right next to us. So it's not SF branded.
Yeah.
I want it to be a little more subtle.
That's good.
But
That's good. Yeah, no, I didn't know you guys were in Sacramento. That's great. I spent a decent amount of time in Sacramento. God, this was so long ago. I talk about it as if it just happened, but I think it was like 2014 or 2013 maybe. But yeah, it was when the Sacramento Kings were transitioning to new ownership and I worked for the NBA, and I was in the internal consulting group when I was helping them like set up and their operations, whatever. But I got to spend like 2 months in Sacramento and I loved it. I was like this.
Yeah.
I was like, this town doesn't get, and like everyone talks about like, especially Bay Area, they're like, oh, I would never, whatever, like Sacramento sucks. Why would you choose that over the Bay Area? And it's like, it's actually kind of cool. Like some of the restaurants are phenomenal. Yeah. It's super cute. So there was this one place along the river that you could like just go and like have a picnic. I don't know. I dug it. But then again, like I was also indoor, like this is over a summer. I was indoors for a lot of it in like air conditioning, so I could understand why some people would feel differently. But anyways, back to distributed organizing. So you have your field organizers, and they're the folks on the ground. They have their turf that they are responsible for. Like I remember dealing with those on the Warren campaign, because when I was like hosting events and like, you know, doing canvassing, I would always ask them like, well, what are our like priority areas that I should target, because I can go anywhere and I can, you know, host events. My entire life then, because I was working full time also, it's like, you know, job, and then my entire weekend / evenings was just volunteering. It was like essentially I had 2 jobs, but it was great, and I'd do it again.
Yeah. Oh God.
I'd do it again.
Absolutely understand.
Yep. So but distributed organizing is everything else, and it took on like a much more prominent role.
Absolutely. Yeah, there was this, so distributed and digital, kind of, I'm gonna like refer to them interchangeably, is really this like, it's truly distributed. So you can imagine like you are one person and you are distributing information out. So like, which there's still sometimes you'll like narrow it down to like one city or like one congressional district or whatever it may be. But like for the most part, it is much larger and much broader. And it's by things like text messages, sometimes distributed does like phone banking. This year, like that was really in field. But things like sending out those text messages. Sometimes there are email programs that are like organizing programs. And then also some other like there's one type of organizing is called relational organizing, which is really like, yeah, it's so imagine you like grab your phone and you like call, I don't know, your college roommate's ex-boyfriend's mom. So you're like 3 degrees of separation, but you still know her. So you like call her and you're like, who are you voting for? And people are a lot more likely to talk to someone they know about voting, about how to vote, about what their actual plans are, than they are like a cold call from a campaign or a cold text from a campaign. Right. So there are organizers on staff who like will use, there's a really great app called Reach that Warren used, and that was actually built for AOC's first campaign. Yeah, which was cool, and it's kind of strange that it's so new because it's become so fundamental.
Yeah.
I used to the Biden campaign.
I used to lead like Reach trainings with with my volunteers. So, oh my God, I can't believe I had no idea that it was that new.
Yeah, it's really new. The Biden campaign used something similar, but called Vote Joe.
I was on Vote Joe.
And yeah, always on Vote Joe. The secret about relational organizing in these apps is that if you want to like creep on your friends a little bit, you can like be like, oh, I see that you didn't vote in 2018. I see it. It's on Zap. You can't lie to me.
Totally guilty. Totally guilty. I'm not ashamed of it.
Yeah, I am. Right. Truly. Yeah, absolutely. So it uses these apps or other tools to show you, not like who anyone voted for or anything like that, but kind of have folks voted, have they registered to vote? And it's really helpful for saying like, you know, like, okay, I have like 100 friends who, since we won Georgia a month and a half ago, let's say I have like 100 friends who live in Georgia. How do I decide who I'm going to reach out to? And so you can use something like Reach or like Vote Joe when that existed, and say like, okay, like 25 of these people have already voted. 20 of these people have not registered to vote, and the registration deadline is in a few days. So like, these are the 20 people that I want to focus on. And then some people are registered to vote, but they haven't voted. So I'm going to focus on them after the voter registration deadline, because these are the ones that have priorities. So that's kind of a lot of what relational organizing is. So that's like the breakdown of what kind of what distributed and digital are, is kind of doing that. And then also some more of digital is like, we, on the Ossoff campaign, we had a really robust digital program, which was awesome. And that included like, I read so many thirsty DMs. I cannot tell you how thirsty people are about John Ossoff.
I've seen it. I've seen it. Like,
I have never seen the word zaddy so much in my life. It's like monitoring the Instagram DMs.
Oh my God. Like sometimes I wonder, because it's like you can be thirsty about someone, but then to like have that transfer into like you taking an action to like like just taking that next step, it's like, all right.
Right. Yeah, but something that we did that was really cool is, if you mention John in your Instagram story and your profile was, if it was private, this didn't happen, but if it was public, it would show up in the DMs on our end. And so like, as people were voting, this is one of my favorite things that we did. As people were voting, they would post photos of themselves with their I voted sticker, like everyone does.
Yeah.
And they would tag John and they would tag the Reverend. And so we would like message them back and be like, thank you so much for voting. And we were clear, like, hi, I'm Tori with Team Ossoff. Like, I'm not actual John Ossoff, but like,
right.
Right, like, thank you so much for voting. Like, I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. Also, do you want to come to this event? Or like, do you want to like, have you talked to your friends about voting or like whatever?
That's so easy.
And it's such a good tool.
Right?
Yeah. And something that, what I really love about organizing, well, there are many things that I love about organizing, but like one of the biggest things that I love about organizing is it is 100% meeting people where they're at. And that's like part of what's so crucial about digital and distributed, is that aspect of meeting people where they're at. And that absolutely includes things like there are young folks who their like primary tool is Instagram or is Facebook, or is TikTok, and or Twitter. Those are like the big four.
Yeah.
And like there's, I think a lot of campaigns and candidates, not folks who I've worked with, everyone that I've worked with has been awesome, but I've like heard a lot about other campaigns and other candidates who just are like not invested in kind of the digital landscape aside from content. So things like putting out videos or like what your tweets are, what your ads are, right. But not invested in that engaging with folks. And it's such an underutilized reality. The cat just jumped up next to me.
Oh my gosh.
It's such an underutilized reality because there are all these people who are so excited and they are at your fingertips. They are right there. They're very online. They're like super engaged. The funniest thing I saw, there's a Twitter account I follow, and it's like Awesome Patrol.
Yeah.
It's like anytime anyone is being thirsty about John Ossoff on Twitter, they find it and they respond, and they're like, and they're not staff, they're just a volunteer, but they would respond and be like, you've been caught simping for John Ossoff. Like now you have to like donate, or like now you have to like volunteer, or like now you need to like share this shit. And it's incredible. I know, it's so good. People are so thirsty for John Ossoff.
Dude, I mean, listen, the man's a babe, but also, and listen, and like not only is he a baby, his wife is also like fucking incredible. Like she's a doctor.
She is really amazing.
And like she, I think what was it, on like election night or something? She like had to work, and I love that. I'm like, yes, that's right. And I mean, he's adorable. Like,
oh my goodness.
But I get it. So talking about, I love this. Actually segues really well into the accessibility conversation, right? Because the whole point of distributed organizing is reaching people where they are and making sure that you're not preventing anyone from engaging and participating. And I mean, when we think about people who are disabled or have different needs, so many are left out in the way campaigns historically have organized and conducted outreach and engagement. So, I mean, I can't think of a better person to talk to about this. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, like, in your experience from an organizer's standpoint, maybe talk about some of the ways that the campaigns that you worked on approached accessibility and inclusiveness, and then also maybe some ways that you've seen that work well. I just, I think for a lot of people, they don't even realize this stuff is happening. So would love to hear from you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's exactly how I think about accessibility. Accessibility is all about ensuring that the most people can engage with you. Like, it's that simple. When like candidates or campaigns or content creators are like not buying into that, when they're like not doing accessibility, you're missing out on people. Like it's truly that simple. Approximately 20% of American adults are disabled. 20%.
I mean, it's for me, sorry, one thing, for me, it's also
go ahead.
It's personal. My dad is disabled. He's been disabled as long as I can remember. He was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's when I was like 2. He was diagnosed really young. Yeah, I think at 8, he was like 39 or 40. And ever since then, like, it's a progressive like disease.
Of course.
And so it has like turned me to looking at, well, how can he still participate, especially as the disease progresses? Like, because I see so many, like, one of the things he was able to do was he did some text banking, which was awesome. But it's because it affects the voice. And so he can't really articulate as well. And his voice is kind of weak now. But and he can't type very fast. Again, it takes more time, but he can do it. So
Yeah.
he would do that. But like, I don't know, it gets me right in the heartstrings because, you know, oh, and then of course I consider disability. I don't know if it, I think there's still some debate, but I have a sleeping disorder, a semi-serious sleeping disorder, that significantly impacts, like my daily behavior, and it's the worst, and I don't like it,
Yeah.
but it's one of those things where it's like, but it can be the worst, but I have to deal with it.
Totally.
So, yeah, and it's similar to narcolepsy. But anyways.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just as like an aside, I think anything like that, like if you consider it a disability, it's a disability as far as I'm concerned. It took me, I mean, I literally was born with the genetic condition that I have, and my mom has it. That's how I have it. And my sister has like has it also, but like less, like a more mild
Like
case.
So it varies in severity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Weirdly,
yeah.
this
So my
is
mom's
weird, actually. I think I've heard of it only because the winner of Rupaul's Drag Race from a few years ago also had it, and it made me like look it up because I was like, well, what is this? And so that's sorry, I it's now like connecting, like, oh, it's the same one. Okay, so yeah, for those of you who don't know, look it up.
Jamila. Is her name Jamila Jamil?
Yes.
Jamila Jamil also has it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And there are a few other celebrities who recently have recently been diagnosed. It takes most people like 30 years to be diagnosed with it.
Wow.
I was lucky that I was diagnosed when I was 7 because that's when my mom was 32, and so that's when she was diagnosed. So I was diagnosed when she was. But yeah, it took her. Like we have issues as kids. Like most people with EDS have like symptoms as kids, and start trying to get diagnosis as kids, and it takes until like late 20s or even late 30s for most people to get diagnosed. That's improving finally, because it was always considered like a very rare disease, and like it's really not. It's like it's not that rare.
It's just they weren't able to detect it, right? Or like they would think it's something else, or they would attribute whatever.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. For the longest time, it was just like, you have anxiety, and my mom would be like, my knee is like, my kneecap is 4 inches to the left of where it's supposed to be. Like that's not anxiety.
Yeah, like I have anxiety that you are not taking this seriously.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Anyway, so back to accessibility.
Yeah.
I love this. No, I love because like I feel like we're both like chatty and we can like go off on tangents and talk about anything. And then in the back of my mind, I'm like, no, be a good moderator. Like,
right. Focus.
Yeah, I'm the the Twitch police over here.
There you go.
So accessibility on your campaigns.
Yeah. So right. So 20% of American adults are disabled. In Georgia alone, there are 1.2 million disabled Georgians. Like, think about how close Georgia was. Think about how much money was spent in Georgia. Like, Senator Ossoff's campaign was the highest fundraising campaign in the history of senatorial campaigns. Wow. Senator Reverend Warnock's was very close. Like the amounts of millions of dollars that were spent is like astronomical. And that money, which I want to be clear, I think both campaigns used every single one of those dollars exceptionally well. There are some campaigns that like get big dollars and don't use them well. I think both of these campaigns used every dollar quite well. But at the same time, like there's 1.2 million Georgians, and we're spending those dollars on like trying to like locate and mobilize every single Democratic Georgian, right? And at the same time, like so much leaves out folks who are disabled, and like disabled people fucking vote. When we are able to. And that's such a it's such an important thing with that addition of when we are able to, because there are so many barriers, and I think there are like two different types of barriers. I mean, there's a shitload of barriers. There are so many barriers. But there's like two different types of barriers, specifically when it comes to voting. One of them is the sort of like the structural barriers in terms of places not being ADA accessible, like voters not being able to get to their polling locations, things of that variety. Things like not being able to get there because there's not accessible transit, even if the like voting. Oh, hello, there's a kitty on my lap.
Oh, hi. Is this your?
What are you doing, ma'am?
Is this your daughter? Hello.
This is my daughter. This is Zora. This is so rare. She normally
Hi, Zora. Baby. Oh, she's so pretty.
She's like, no, I'm good.
She's like, thank you. I've made my appearance. Like, goodbye.
Exactly. She's like, no. Yeah. So there are those barriers, like not being able to get to your polling location, not being able to get inside your polling location. Things like some touch screens are not accessible for folks who are blind. Some options are not accessible for folks who are both blind and deaf. Some things, like some places, even though they are required by law, some places the building itself will be ADA accessible, but like they won't have any voting booths that you can actually get a wheelchair into. Right. So there's all these different variations of structural barriers to voting that come from the inability to get to a place to vote, to be able to vote when you get there, like those sorts of barriers. And then there's accessibility, or there's inaccessibility issues within campaigns themselves, and kind of within the way that campaigns interact with people. So some of those examples are things like maybe I'm gonna like, I don't want to just pick a candidate, but so we'll just go with like fake candidate. So like fake candidate posts a video on Twitter, and fake candidate's video on Twitter does not include captions or like an ASL interpreter or something similar. That means that folks who are deaf or who are hard of hearing won't be able to like access that information. So maybe if this is a video about how to vote, then like deaf people and hard of hearing people won't be able to get the information about how to vote, which is really crucial. You need to know how to vote. You need to know registration deadlines, those sorts of things. Yeah. Another example is, let's say that same fake candidate posts like an image on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or whatever it may be. Yeah. On one of their socials, that has the steps on how to register to vote. You know, you need XYZ, you go to this website, blah, 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 whatever. And it's spelled out on the graphic, but maybe it's not written out in the actual tweet. And then there's an option on any social media site. There's an option for something called alt text. And what it is you write an image description. So the same as how at the beginning I said, like, I'm a white woman, red hair, black glasses in front of two bookcases. It's very similar. So let's say your image says like, vote on January 5th, because that's when our elections are. Vote on January 5th. So you would, and it's on like a blue background and it's in white text. So you would say in the alt text, like, white text on blue background that says vote on January 5th. And why that matters is that then people who use screen readers, so blind people or people with low visibility, their screen readers are a tool that like literally reads out loud what's on the screen. Okay. And that's what that alt text does. If you don't include alt text, it just says image. Okay. So yeah, it'll just say image. There are some, so like Facebook actually has a pretty okay, like it'll guess what's on the image. It does well with text. It does not do well with like anything that's a picture of something. The best example of this is there was a picture of like an aerial shot of Central Park.
Mm-hmm.
It's covered in snow. It's aerial, so it's like very high up. You can see the park. There's all the trees and buildings and stuff.
Yeah.
And the AI thought that it was black text on a white background.
This is what I think of when people are like, "Oh no, we're so close to Skynet. Like AI's gonna take over." I'm like, AI can't identify a piece of pizza correctly yet. So like, let's table that like discussion until we get to that point, and then we can start freaking out a little bit and like building bunkers. But yeah, I think we're a little ways off.
Yeah. So that's like such a good example where like technology can't do it for you. It can't. You have to do it. Yep. It doesn't take that much, but you still have to do it. And it can be a little more complicated. So if you're like, it's like I post photos of my cats a lot. That won't shock anyone. And so like they're sitting next to each other and I'm like, oh, like small black and white cat sitting to the left of like large brown and white fluffy cat. Like these sorts of things that just like, for like pictures of cats, like not a super huge, like, it's not gonna like have a super huge impact, but it's still important to do. So that like blind and like low vision people still get to interact with your content in the same way.
Totally.
Or not in the same way, but they still get to interact with the fullness of your content.
Right. You're not, you're like, and that's the whole point of any content you're putting out there. I mean, I guess now I'm calling myself a content creator, even though I'm just like, I don't know what that means. Like, yeah, I stream, whatever. But like, to think like, well, as a content creator and also in my professional life as a marketer, why would you close yourself off to such a massive swath of your potential audience? Of course I'd want to, like have, especially when the fixes aren't that massive, right? Like it's not that hard to add alt text to your images.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, you're going to probably caption the image anyway, right? So like, why not just, you know, type something else in so that everyone can engage with it?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what it is that like, if you're not doing it, you're missing out on people. You're missing out on people. And especially for something like campaigns where you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, which is still just like my brain cannot comprehend. Like you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars and there are people right there, you know, that you might be missing. And it is the same. It's very similar with captions. I think there are, something that I think a lot of people don't think about, but that I think is really important. So imagine you're like sitting in a lobby of like a doctor's office, which we don't do anymore because of COVID. But like before that, you're sitting in the lobby of a doctor's office, you're looking at a TV, the sound is off. And it has those like hideous black and white captions on it that no one can read, right? They're required by law to have the captions. But if you have your own captions on it, they can just show those. So the shitty black and white ones. Right, so you have the option to make it fit with your branding, to make sure that the words are correct. Some candidates, it's going to get correct, like the name Joe Biden, it's always going to look great. I volunteered with Julian Castro. If you use auto captions for someone like Julian Castro, it has no idea what to do, which it should. Like that's also a problem of like racist systems, right?
I was just going to say, it's like, that's just more like examples of institutional racism built into things, especially like, I love when people call Twitter out for that shit. Like, or you do like two photos or you show photos and then it's always going to zoom in on like the white person for the preview. And it's like, you know why that is? It's because these algorithms are written by people with bias. So
exactly.
But yes.
Yeah. Yep, and it's the same with like those black and white shitty captions that you see on like a crappy TV that's playing, you know, wherever you are. Or you're in the airport and it's up, or like whatever it is. No one should be flying unless you're vaccinated.
Oh my god, yeah.
I have a public health background, so I feel like it's crucial.
Don't get me started. I know. Well, and my fiance is immunocompromised, so like he has really bad asthma, which is like a respiratory inflammation. Yeah, so it's like so we've been super careful. That's why it's funny to me when like, especially here in California, when they announced all of a sudden like, oh, we're going back into full lockdown. I'm like, who wasn't in full lockdown? Like, I've
Right.
been in full lockdown. Like,
Yeah,
can
totally.
people stay home? We're dying here too, and like desperate for like human interaction, but we don't do it because we're not murderous.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah,
right.
so in the campaigns you've worked on, so it sounds like you guys have had a lot of these things implemented. As someone who
Yeah.
works with volunteers, especially, was there anything that you would do as an organizer to make your ways to volunteer more accessible for your like beloved volunteers that you like become like your family during
Yeah,
the election?
they really do. Volunteers really do become like your family. That's such a good question. I think a lot of those things like also need to come up,
Mm-hmm.
including like we for the Ossoff campaign, all of our trainings and everything else were captioned. Um, the like a gold standard would be to have it like captioned and have ASL ASL interpreters. That's like the dream, and the reason it's the dream to have both is because like some people who may, especially for folks who are like newly hard of hearing, they may not know ASL.
Yeah.
And then also folks who like if they're hard of hearing or deaf and also potentially have low visibility or like find it difficult to follow captions, they would also have ASL accessible. So I think like the dream is to have both. And also something that's so important is a lot of the times like when campaigns, and again like the campaigns I was on were very good about this, but I've interacted with a lot of campaigns, of course, and a lot of times campaigns would be like, oh, we're having like an event for disabled people, let's make sure we have captions, let's make sure we have ASL, let's make sure we have these different things, but then they're not implemented the rest of the time. And I just want to be like, guys,
Yeah.
right, like you have disabled volunteers, you have disabled voters, you have disabled donors, you have disabled staff, period. Like I used to be like, oh, like you'll probably have disabled staff, like you have disabled staff, especially now, when like long haulers for COVID has happened, and like also that like so much like mental health stuff has just like exploded in the last year, like so understandably. Like I think if you have staff, you have disabled staff. You have volunteers, you have disabled volunteers. You have voters and donors and supporters, you have disabled voters and donors and supporters. We exist. It's kind of, we exist and we're here and we're interacting at every level, including like sometimes people assume that like disabled people only want to text. And like, nope, there are plenty of disabled people who are also phone breakers. There are plenty of disabled people who also canvas. There are plenty of disabled people doing like any and every level of political work. We're in it, in all of it. And I think that that's something that's like really important, is that accessibility is not only a thought during disability stuff.
Yeah, it should be boxes. Those boxes that you're ticking for, like a event centered at disabled volunteers or whatever. Like that, those should be things that you consider for any event. I will say, like the Warren campaign, I thought did a really good job, especially during Get Out the Vote, because my house was a Get Out the Vote staging location, and well, so the main part of our house is upstairs, but I set up space downstairs in where our garage is and stuff. So I was like, okay, well, if we have folks where they have to go up the stairs, it's going like there's plenty of room. I've set it up. Also, whenever I hosted, because I did a ton of tabling events where I would host tabling events, I would always bring extra seating, because I'm like, well, I don't know, because, and also like even if someone needs seating, not everyone like has the means or the ability to bring their own seating with them, and so that was always really important, because I saw it as like my role as, I guess, like a volunteer organizer, but like it was my role to make sure that, okay, if anyone shows up to my event as a volunteer, they're dedicating their time to be here.
Exactly.
Like I want to make sure that I have provided everything I can so that they can fully participate and not feel as though they are, you know, being cast aside or, you know, just not taken care of. And I maybe take it to an extreme because, like, I also brought like snacks and other things for my volunteers because I love them.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I honestly I think that that's perfect. I think a big part of what people need to do and what you did really well is like being proactive and not just reactive. Like a lot of times, like volunteers will come to campaigns and be like, I want to volunteer, but I'm deaf, so I don't want a phone bank. What can I do? Mm-hmm. And like campaigns kind of like freak out sometimes. And they're like, I don't know what to do. What can you do? And I'm like, texting is like right there. It's right there. You know how I know? We have 10,000 volunteers doing it.
Yep.
Yep. Right. Like these sorts of things where it's like, you don't have to panic. Mm-hmm. It's going to be okay. If you just the accessibility, if you start with recognizing again that you will have disabled volunteers, you will have disabled voters, you will have disabled supporters, et cetera, if you start from that place, then you're not like freaking out. Mm-hmm. Later. You're not like, oh, I don't know.
Totally.
Yeah, which is huge. And also, so when I worked with Texas Democrats, we had 10,000 texters, which was like,
wow,
incredible, but also like I needed to sleep for a week after the campaign. Which I did not do. I turned around and started working for John very fast.
Yeah, you did. I was gonna say, I'm like, it was like a matter of days in between when you were like, oh, I'm done. You were like, oh, I'm done. I can relax. And then you're like, I'm working for Ossoff. I was like, oh, Tori, yeah. When are you gonna sleep?
I've slept. I've slept. I've caught up on my sleep debt.
Good.
It's good. I sleep in sometimes. Well, to like 8:30. Like,
oh my god. Oh, to be I wish I could say I got up at 8:30. But that's my journey.
Right, but yeah, so we had 10,000 volunteers, which is like still absolutely mind-boggling to me. And that campaign ended 3 months ago. But 10,000 volunteers, and we would get, there would be people who would text and say like, I want to volunteer, but I'm deaf, or I want to volunteer, but like, does it work with screen readers? And like these sorts of questions, or especially people who are like, I want to volunteer, but I am extremely high risk. Mm-hmm. In the throes of COVID, especially like thinking about how horrifying things were in like October, mm-hmm. where like there wasn't the vaccine like we didn't know when a vaccine was going to be coming. Things were very scary. I mean, things are very scary. I want to be super clear. Like, I am high risk, and like,
sure,
it's terrifying. I've left my house 3 times in the last 11 months. Yeah. I'm doing great. Right. But like people saying like, I am really afraid to volunteer. Like, what can I do? And then we were ready. And then like, I knew we were going to get those questions because every campaign gets those questions. Mm-hmm. And so like we were proactive about them. And I had someone join our volunteer moderator team. So the folks who like, there were 90 plus people who like helped everything for those 10,000 people. Damn. And so my 90 plus people who I worked the closest with, I had someone apply to be a moderator. And she said like, I want to do this, but I'm partially deaf, and like I don't know if that'll be a problem. And so I like reached out and I was like, that's not a problem at all. Like, I've seen your questions and stuff. You're doing great at this. How I normally do my like training for moderators is very like audible. So like, but it's just going through this one guide, and there's like nothing that I say out loud that's not on the guide. So for you, if you just want to go through the guide, like that's plenty for me. And then like, let me know if you have questions. And she told me later that she had asked like every campaign that texted her, she was like, I am like partially deaf. Like, are there ways that I can volunteer? And no one else responded.
Wow.
I know. And she like, I mean, you don't have to be like a phenomenal volunteer to be a person who like campaigns should respond to, but she was a phenomenal volunteer. She was absolutely incredible. She did like so well. She was just like, she was so great.
Jeez.
And so like all these campaigns who are like, oh, like we're dying for volunteers, we're dying for cash, we're dying for voters, like people are right there. They're right there. They are at your fingertips. They are trying to get to you. And you are putting up barriers without even realizing it. That makes it so that they can't get to you. Or like we had an answer, like prepared. So like we told volunteers, if someone asks, like, I don't know if I can volunteer based on XYZ, like, can I? This is what you can talk about with them. Like, it's straightforward.
Totally.
So that, yeah, exactly. Especially like a lot of volunteers are not super comfortable talking about disability. And that's like, I get it. If it's not something that you are well acquainted with, if it's not something that you like feel like you have the knowledge on, you don't want to risk offending anyone. You don't want to risk hurting anyone's feelings. And it can like really shut you down. And so I think that that's a huge part of it too, of why we have to be proactive, is so that like our volunteers aren't like, oh, I'm stuck. Like,
right.
Oh, I don't know what to do. Oh, help.
Totally.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Oh,
exactly.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about, and I think you put this out like earlier last year, because as we touched on, not all disabilities are as visible or noticeable. There's plenty of invisible ones like PTSD, like chronic anxiety, OCD, other things that could affect. And one of the things I love that you put out was this guide for, I think it was for texters or for people, folks that organize with texting. Like if people get hostile replies, because that can be really triggering for folks. I would love if you talked a little bit about, your process for like developing this guide for how to, work with volunteers through that and send things through the proper channels, so that you're also not putting your volunteers who may have one of those invisible disabilities and could potentially have it triggered by some of their engagement, like how to handle that as an organizer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think accessibility for mental health is also so and I think that there are some like really easy ones, like don't use ableist language, like
simple,
right on. Like be inclusive, like be gender neutral with your terms, like these sorts of things that are like easy ones, or should be easy ones. They're like right there.
Yep.
You just like you can just like reach up and grab them. They're so doable.
Well, I love it. That's why when people make a big deal, they're like, oh, now I have to use gender neutral pronouns. Like, yeah, it's like the easiest thing you can do. It's so it requires so little effort and the impact is massive. So just like do it.
It's right there.
Why wouldn't you?
Right. And like that's also accessibility, because that's like it makes it more accessible for people who are trans or non-binary, and like just there's so many things that people don't think of as accessibility, but they all are. But yes, definitely accessibility for mental health needs. Something that I think that people in political spaces really do not want to address and don't want to admit is that volunteers who speak with voters or who text with voters, who interact with voters, are unfortunately, and I hate this fact, but it is a reality, are unfortunately going to get horrifying content. It's going to happen. I cannot tell you how much I wish it did not, but it is going to happen. QAnon is exploding. Obviously, that was very clear on January 6th and in the time since. But before that, any texter, any phone banker could have told you that it was exploding, could have told you that it was growing. Because like there are these interactions. I don't want to like scare anyone away. Like organizing is beautiful, volunteering is beautiful. You will talk with people who make you cry because it's like such a beautiful conversation.
Oh,
The connections are incredible.
I can attest, like it is, you
Yeah.
meet some of the most wonderful people and have these incredible conversations where you learn about their life and like these are members of your community. If you're doing local stuff, like I don't know, I've met so many incredible people from my community whose stories are just like woven into the fabric of San Francisco and this city's history, and it's so rewarding. But I've also, you know, you're gonna have also some interactions that are negative and not and can be potentially triggering, especially if you're someone with PTSD or anxiety or something else. Like it's just unfortunately comes with the territory.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I have pretty severe PTSD. I'm in a really good place with it. I've done a lot of therapy.
Yay, therapy.
It's very expensive, but yay, therapy.
Yeah.
Yay, therapy. I've done so much of it. I had therapy this morning.
Nice.
It's very good. Strongly recommend if like it's affordable and accessible for you.
Yes.
But I do have pretty severe PTSD and things that are like certain types of violence, and I'm not going to be graphic about anything or not going to like describe anything so that folks know. Also, when I'm talking about this, I always do a little disclaimer of like, this is pretty heavy. If anyone who's watching is like, I need to take a break, I need to step away, like this is a lot for me, like do that. That's okay. Do that. I always think that's important to like express. There are certain types of violence that are extremely triggering for me. And I'm very upfront about it, in part because I have to be. Like my certain things that are triggering my brain just like shuts off. Like I cannot do anything other than like the coping mechanisms that I have for it. Like I cannot think, I can't write. Sometimes I can talk, but like not always. Like those sorts of things. And so so like when I started Texas Democrats, I was like very upfront that I was like, sometimes I'm going to tell you I have to take a PTSD break and I don't have a choice. I would prefer to not have to do that. But sometimes I'm going to have to do that. And I've been really lucky that all of my coworkers on all the different campaigns have been incredible about it and like have always been like, one, let us know what you need, and two, like take all the time you need, which has been really great. And strongly recommend if you are a coworker of someone who has PTSD or like similar mental health stuff, if anyone is like brain off, like just be like, okay, like that's cool.
Give them the space.
Like in previous jobs, like pre-organizing, there was definitely a time where I was like, I have to take a PTSD break, and someone was like, how do I do the 30 things you have to do? And I was like, I don't know.
You're like, that is not like, I will get to that after this is didn't we just discuss this? Like
like I don't have a choice. Exactly.
I used to
so
for me I used to get panic attacks. I had horrible, it was also because I was in a very toxic job environment, and the only way I could deal with it when I felt one coming on is I would go to the bathroom, I'd lock myself in a stall, and I'd sit there just breathing for like 5 minutes. And I was like, I just need this moment, and then like I'll be okay. But and it was because like, and I couldn't tell people like, oh, I'm having a panic attack, because then I was afraid of the stigmatization. That's also part of the reason I developed the panic attacks, was because just that work environment was not healthy. But I get it. Like, and it's not like I had a choice. I'm like, well, I can either like stay here and like freak out and like not be able to function and like, you know, hyperventilate and like tense up, whatever, or I can go to the bathroom and like just like
be back in 5 minutes.
Exactly. So I get
it. Yeah, exactly. So when I started volunteering, Julian campaign was excellent about this, including like I was helping with debate prep, which was incredible. I strongly recommend for folks who are like, I want to get real into the shit. like I recommend volunteering on like smaller campaigns, because you'll be able to do like things that you never dreamed of. It's really cool. Strongly recommend. I'm so glad that Holy Hands campaign is where it started.
So
yeah, because I say we, because my partner and I both like helped with debate prep, which was amazing. And there was a day where I was like working on like pulling stuff up for debate prep, and something was really triggering, and I like messaged my organizer, and I was like, I'm super sorry, I can't think. Like, I won't be able to get this done in time. Either I can like get it to you like 12 hours later than I was supposed to, or I need someone else to take it over. And she was really fantastic about being like, don't worry about it at all. I'll get someone else to take it over. Like, totally okay, no worries. And she was really comforting, and she was like, if that happens, like, you're always welcome to be like, I need this to come off my plate. Like, it's totally okay. And that was really meaningful to me, and like was when I started to be like, oh, like this is real shit. Like I feel really safe in this space. It was the first time that I was like, oh, this space is like for me.
Yeah.
Like I fit here. And so it's really important to me to always build that also. And that's part of, so I built that guide. And what the guide is it's a guide to handling like sensitive, harassing or offensive or violent or threatening content. And I did build that because there were other campaigns where like people would get that and none of the volunteer leaders knew what to do. They were like, oh, let me just like ask us. Oh, hello Ruby.
From Ruby. Hi. Hi. Hi, Ruby.
She's so excited.
Hi. I know. Oh my God. She's such a derp. Sorry, she like because of how I have my camera positioned, like it can't show when she comes in, but she'll always come up to the side of the chair and just be like
I love that. That's so good.
I was like, all right, we can say hello. Yeah. And she's good with cats, actually. I purposely, my parents have 2 cats, and one of them she's buddies with. The other one just like he's kind of a jerk in general. We always joke that he's a dumb jock because he's like he's a little tuxedo cat, and he has a half mustache, so he always looks just so like goofy. Chester. and he's so athletic and like fun and playful and whatever. He's also like, our nickname for him is Sack of Potatoes, because you can I trust him alone in a room with a toddler, because like the toddler can just do whatever and he's like, okay. But like with Ruby, he just like is trifling. He just starts shit, and I'm like, he just is a dumb jock because he's like this super athletic whatever, like maybe means well but doesn't know how to interact with women.
Yeah. I love that. That's amazing.
So but Ruby, she's otherwise like very good. If she sees them running, the cat's running, she chases after them, but not to like, oh, I gotta get him. It's because she's a herding breed. So she's like, oh, I gotta like herd him, and the cat will turn back at her, funny. And she's like, never mind, I'm sorry, and leaves.
Honey, do you want to hand me the giant monkey? Garrett is gonna bring over a Theo. You can give him the hammock.
Theo, oh, your son.
So, my son, he's asleep in a hammock. So Garrett is bringing me the hammock. You can put it on me. I got it.
Oh my God.
Oh, there we go.
Goodness.
Look at this boy. Honey,
Theo,
you're looking the wrong way.
Theo.
His sister ran off. Okay, Garrett is gonna help. Lucky.
Look at this. Such a diva.
I know. He's what is here, buddy.
Such a diva.
Oh, there he
is. Oh,
look at that pretty boy. Yes. This is his hammock.
Oh my God,
Theo.
I love it.
What a good boy.
At him. Theo.
Oh. He's like definitely still waking up. So he's a little disoriented.
Huh? What? Oh, Theo. Hey, you big floof. Hi, you big floof.
He's a very big floof. Hi, Logan. What are you looking at?
He's so cute. I love when you like show just how big he is, because he's a they're rag dolls, right? So he just like, they are just like gigantic floofs.
Yeah. He when he just like sprawls, we also will be like, oh, like who spilled all these mashed potatoes on our bed? He just like
I
looks
love
like,
that.
what are you looking at?
Theo.
Your sister's not over there.
I know. He's just like he's like, I don't have to show my face.
I
Like,
know.
these people don't deserve me. He's like,
What do you think?
pay my appearance fee.
This is so funny because normally he's so like, yes, I will stare at the camera.
He's so funny. Look at Theo. Yes, come say hi, kitty. Hi.
Yes.
I know. Cats they're on their own schedule. They're on their
What are you
own.
looking at?
Hi. Hello,
Oh,
sir.
What are you looking at? There he is.
Oh, hello.
There's
he
a good boy.
is. Oh,
He's
look at
so
those big
funny.
blue eyes.
That booger.
Hi,
Yeah.
Theo.
What a pretty boy.
Hi. Oh,
Oh,
look at the
there.
pretty boy. Oh, look at him. Oh,
Hi, buddy.
oh.
He's so funny. He'll wake up a little more. Oh, yeah, we love a good scritch.
Oh yeah, especially if you get right on like the right spot. And
Yep.
then it's like, ugh. I know. Alex knows exactly where Ruby's spot is, like on her scruff, and as soon as she hits it, you can just see with her mannerism, she immediately is like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
And is
They're
frozen
so
and just
funny.
like can't. She's just like, yes, more. Oh my gosh, she's
That's
so
so
cute.
good.
I miss. Oh my god, I miss living with cats so much. There's something
Yeah.
so special. Hi.
They are.
Hi,
We
Theo.
also we do also love dogs. And oh, look at that alert boy. What are you doing?
Oh, what you see?
Are you gonna try
Theo?
to get down? Maybe don't try to get down.
Okay, you apex predator. Yeah, well,
Are
be
you just
careful.
gonna rearrange? Maybe.
He hasn't just. It
Can you
looks
just
like it.
rearrange?
Yeah, I think he's
Okay.
he's figuring out his next move. There's a lot of calculation.
There
goes
is. There you
into
go.
it.
Yeah, get more comfy and hit me in the face with your tail. Yep, that's what we want.
He's like, how about I like still sit in this thing, but just like not facing you. I also love
Exactly.
when cats do that. When like
I,
Chester does this, he'll like come into the room to like check things out, and we'll be like, oh, we'll give you attention, and then he'll be like, I'm gonna sit not facing you. Like,
Exactly.
and we're like, fine.
Exactly.
Oh, he's such a sweetie.
They're so funny. Hi, pretty boy. What are you doing?
Oh,
He's like, I'm actively choosing not to look at the camera. Is what I'm
right,
doing.
Theo. It's hard for me to not take this personally.
Right.
He's like, yeah, because I just like saw your dog on the screen. Like
There you go.
that makes you very sus.
Right.
Oh,
Okay,
Theo.
we'll stay here as long as you want, Pumpkin. You want to look over here? He's like,
No, I don't.
no.
But yeah.
It's so funny too, because sometimes he's very loud. Like Zora meows occasionally, but it's rare. He is very loud, and he has this one toy. Are you trying to climb my chair right now?
Wow.
Zora's trying to climb the back of the chair. He has this one toy that literally it's just a plastic stick with a long piece of rainbow fabric on the end. That's it. It was $6.
Yeah.
And it is his absolute favorite fucking thing. And he, no matter what time of day it is, no matter what you're doing, if he decides he wants to play, he will drag it to you. Including we were laying in bed the first night that we had it. We were laying in bed. It's 2:00 in the morning, so we were asleep. And he suddenly was in the bed screaming at us. So we turned the light on for like, what is happening? And it was just that he had jumped onto the bed with the toy, like wanted us to play with him with the toy.
Classic cat move.
Garrett,
Classic
yeah,
cat move.
Garrett just had a conference earlier this week for work, like a 2.5-day conference, and like every time that Garrett had to speak, like Theo appeared with the rainbow toy and would just like scream at him.
I love it.
Again, he's like, yes,
Aw.
I am a good boy.
I am the best boy, of course.
Exactly. Can I turn you around again?
So
He's like, I would prefer that you did not.
The cat one of the cats I used to live with, my roommate had in New York, was a Norwegian forest cat. So like super floofy. Oh yeah, her name was Mia, and like she. Yeah, you think you're gonna escape, Theo? Think again.
There we go.
Think again. Oh, look at you!
Hi,
Hi,
pretty boy.
in your little hammock. Oh,
Yeah.
you're in your little hammock, Theo. Yes, you are. Oh, you're such a cutie, and you're so
pretty
floofy. But yeah, so Mia, like, she was so vocal and would always, and I had to be careful because, like, especially when I was working at the NBA, our like dress code was business, like, or business casual-ish.
Sure.
So I had to wear like nylons a lot or a lot like tights. But like, especially when I'm getting ready in the morning, she'd be so eager to like come say hi or whatever, and so she'd follow me around the apartment, but she would do this thing where if I stood still, she would like come up
Oh yeah.
on the side, and it's not like her claws would be out, but just like even just like a little bit, I was like, I had to. There was one morning where I went through like 3 different tights because I was just like, Mia, goddamn, like you keep like tearing them. Let me. Okay, Theo. Okay.
Where are you going? You
Are
on
you
the
just
move?
gonna turn around again?
I think so. I think that's
That
what we're
would
doing.
be
Oh,
Theo.
are you gonna try to jump on that bookcase? Because that's where. Oh,
Oh,
okay.
oh,
Oh,
you see
he's
your,
gonna
you
pounce.
see your, oh, get him, yeah.
Yes, I
Oh,
got very
I
much.
love it. But yeah, and Mia would just like it was funny too because normally like I guess she was like a very dog-like cat. But like
Yeah.
anyone new came into the apartment immediately, she would just follow you around and be like meow 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 because she'd be like pet me please,
Right.
hello. Like you could just, if we've tested this, someone came in and like didn't give her any attention. He just went and sat on her couch, and I have a picture of him like just sitting there. He has not moved or like whatever, and she's on his chest just like facing him, being like, "Sir."
That's incredible. That's so good.
Oh, I miss her. Like, talk about that was I lived there when I was like having panic attacks, and I can't tell you how therapeutic and wonderful it was. If I just had a terrible day at work to come home, and then you have like 2 super friendly, lovely cats that are just like, "Hi, friend, I will like love you forever," and you're like, "Yes, please, thank you." Yeah, I had a bad day.
How I got Zora was I got her in 2016. There was an election. I don't know if you knew. It was really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And the day after the election, I was on the phone with my sister and I was sobbing, like you do. And my sister used to run an animal shelter. She ran at the animal shelter at that time. And she was coming to visit for Thanksgiving. And she was like, "I'm bringing you a cat." And I was like, "I'm not really supposed to have a cat in my apartment," as I was like weeping. I was like trying to say that in between.
Right.
And she was like, "I don't know what you said, but I'm bringing you a cat." And so she brought me Zora. So a lot of people did a lot of things after the election. I got a cat.
Well, there you go. I mean, it took.
And then Zora would get bored and lonely. And so that's when we got Theo, who at the time was small and a normal sized kitten. And now he's very large.
I mean,
And she's still a tiny baby.
Kittens become cats very quickly.
They do.
One of my best friends just went through that. Like, she got a kitten in June or July. Like, she got herself a little pandemic kitty. And oh yeah, and he was so little. And now it's funny because like we will do Zoom calls to like check in with my group of friends, and like over that course of time, you've just seen like every time we do a Zoom call, I'm just like, his name's Mally, and I'm just like, Mally's gotten bigger, and she's like, I know, I wish he'd stop. I miss my little kitten. It's like, that kitten's gone, girl. You got a cat now.
Yeah, he was aged out.
I know. We've got derailed, but in the most wonderful way.
Truly, that was such a good reason. Right. So kind of bringing it back into the heavier stuff. Right. So there were campaigns that like they didn't have a protocol, and they kind of were like, "Oh, when it happens, we'll like deal with it," which is woefully inadequate. Is honestly where that's at. I like could use gentler language, but it's woefully inadequate.
Yeah.
Any campaign, organization, content creators, anything who have people who speak with voters are gonna get horrifying content. It's gonna happen. I wish that it didn't. It does. And it's much better to be, again, proactive about it instead of reactive, especially if you're a staff member and you like lead volunteer leaders who then lead volunteers, and then the volunteers are getting the horrifying content. So you're like 3 steps removed.
Yeah.
Like sometimes people won't know what to do, and so and staff are hard to get to sometimes. If you're like, we have 3 staff and we have 10,000 volunteers,
right.
That's a lot of separation, you know.
Yeah.
And so like being really proactive and saying, you know, like, there are some level of things that like don't need to come up to the staff. There are some level of things that like the staff should review them, like it's probably okay, and then there are some things that absolutely have to go to staff. So kind of the guidelines that I made of the like, were like a 3-tiered system, and so I made the guide for my volunteer leaders, so those like 90 moderators who helped the like 10,000 people, the 10,000 volunteers. And what it was like, if people are getting sensitive content, so things that are not violent or threatening, but they still might be violent, but like aren't actively violent, aren't like threats of violence. So things like QAnon theories, right, which can be really harmful to receive, can be really scary and hard to receive, but may not be like threatening per se.
Right.
So things like QAnon content, things like mostly QAnon content is what we use with this. So someone might post and say like, oh, I got like this QAnon-y thing. It was like a lot. How do I respond? And so what we would do is the volunteer leader, the moderator, would respond with like, I'm so sorry you got that. Thank you for letting me know. You can opt them out. And like, I'm going to like delete your thing that said it if it has like the words in it, so that it's not upsetting for anyone else. And that's kind of how we handled like sensitive content. And I think like for a lot of organizers, especially if you've been in it for a while, you get really accustomed to receiving horrifying things. Becomes an everyday thing, which is like, it shouldn't be, and that's pretty horrifying in its own right. But you get, to some extent, you get accustomed to it. Some people more than others, of course. Like I'm never going to be accustomed to it. It's I have PTSD. I can't. But I'm accustomed to some things, but not others. Right. But like, it's important to remember that like the volunteer who's getting it might be their first time volunteering. They might have just started. This might be their first interaction with a voter, which is absolutely going to destroy someone if that's where they're at. It won't destroy everyone. Some people just like keep rolling, but it's really for some people. And I think it's better to like overly apologize or like overly check in than it is to underdo so and like have someone be experiencing like harm or have it be triggering or whatever it may be. So that's what we did with like sensitive content, and then things that were harassing or offensive, so racism, misogyny, homophobia, like slurs of any kind, anti-Semitism, all these sorts of things. Had a similar approach in terms of like, I'm so sorry you got that. Thank you for letting us know. You can opt them out. Like, I'm going to delete we work in Slack primarily. So we would say like, I'm going to your comment or your post, but like we would tag them so they would for sure still see it. And then also ask, do you need anything? Like, are you okay? And I think that was also really important because again, some people are like not going to have big reactions to having a bunch of slurs thrown at them, but some people fucking are. And like, that is okay. Like, we should never approach things from a point of like, well, you just gotta get used to it. Like, you don't.
Right.
If you do get used to it, like, cool, but you do not have to get used to it. Like, it is okay if it is upsetting to you every single time. And so like really just centering it around like the safety. Hey, they were like, we're gonna slap each other.
Oh my God, I know. Half the time with my parents' cats, it's like the moment when you see them like being so cute, like sitting on like a window seat together, you're like, oh, so cute. And it's like, wait like 15 minutes. Well, then we'll see if it's still cute. But yeah.
Yep, I know that in my soul.
That's like siblings, right? Anyone that's had siblings, that's how it is. Like we can play super nice together, but like then you're gonna squabble. It happens.
Yeah, it does. Right.
But yeah.
So
that's really
that's what we would do with that. And then the level when it's like violent or threatening, which again, like, it happens. It's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I hate it, and I wish it did not.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want this fact to like scare anyone away,
Yeah.
but it does happen. So we had this scaled system of like, again, like, I'm so sorry you got that. Campaigns will often ask you for like a screenshot, or if it's something that you can link to, like a link to it, so that if it's something that can go to security, it might go to security. And like, and then also we would I would have folks DM whoever got the violent or threatening thing, just to do an extra level of like, I'm so sorry you got that. Do you need anything? And also included like, please feel free to take a break or to step away if you need to. And I think that like that final level, that like take a break, step away if you need to, is really important, because like we talk about elections, and this is true about elections. We talk about elections as they are like life and death. They are the highest stakes. When we lose elections, there are people who will die because of it. So like, these are extraordinarily high stakes, and people will feel like they like can't take a break, they can't step away, they can't like lean back for a second and breathe.
Yeah.
Especially when you're like getting things that are like violent or threatening, it like ups that ante for you. You're like, oh, like now I extra have to do it, like I have to fight back against it, which like, very fair. Totally feel that. But it's really important to come from like a staff or a leader position and say like, it is okay if you breathe. Like, it is okay for you to take care of yourself. And it is like, that's the thing. It is, and no one should feel like they as an individual have to lift all of the work. And so I think that's a big part of why I put that into the guide and like built that in, was that like, truly it's distributed organizing, and that means that like, it doesn't come from one person. It can't come from only one person. Like, any one person as an individual does not have to carry all of it. Like, the burden, not the burden, but like the work is spread.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so that's kind of where that was coming from. And I think that like, if I wasn't a survivor, that I potentially wouldn't know that someone needed to do that. Right. There are some people who are like, I'm thankful that like, for my trauma, because it made me stronger. I am not one of those people.
Me neither.
Like,
I'm
more
also
all power to those folks.
Yeah, I'm also a survivor, and I'm like,
right.
I think about how strong I'd be if I didn't have to fucking deal with that trauma.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. All power to those folks. Like,
right.
Totally understand. Just that is like not who I am as a person at all. I'm like, I absolutely wish that none of the horrible shit that ever happened to me had happened. But not but, comma, and comma, and because of my experiences surviving as a survivor, I know that this is needed. And I think it's like part of why it's so important for campaigns and other spaces to hire and include people who have this sort of life experiences, who are not only people who are like white and cis and het and male and able-bodied and all the whole gamut. Like, it's really important and rich. And I feel like there's like a seventh one that I'm forgetting, but like, that's that's part of why it's so important that campaigns are accessible in these ways, is because like, people bring so much. There is so much to gain from bringing in people and acknowledging and learning from and growing with people who have varied life experiences, who know what to do when you're getting a lot of violent shit, who know what to do when something is inaccessible, who know what to do when like volunteers experience homophobia, racism, misogyny, transphobia, which is like so pertinent right now, especially with this like bullshit with Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Oh my God. I hate her so much. And I don't use hate. And I
What a
don't
mood.
and I'm reluctant to use the word hate in a lot of instances because I feel like it's like lost its power, but in this case I'm just like I find nothing redeeming. I find nothing redeeming.
Yeah, especially so for anyone who doesn't know a reference, Marjorie Taylor Greene has done a lot of horrifying things. But most recently, she has opposed the Equality Act. And her office is directly across the hall from Maureen Newman. Maureen Newman is the representative for the Illinois 3rd. She won the primary this year against a man who had been in the seat since I was born, since 1993.
Wow.
And who was anti-choice and anti-gay and anti-trans people, and like he was really bad. So she won that seat. She has a trans daughter. And she knew that Marjorie Taylor Greene voted against the Equality Act, so she put a trans flag outside of her office.
One flag.
Sure.
Your video seems to have frozen.
Ooh.
So
can you see me now?
Hold on. No.
Ooh. I can. Okay. Do you want me to try turning it off and back on?
Yeah. Turn it off, back on.
Sure.
I just want to like because this is such an important like.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're back. Now? Okay.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
But yes, she has a trans daughter.
Yeah, Maureen Newman has a trans daughter. Maureen Newman put a trans flag outside of her office. There's a very cute video of her doing so.
Oh, it's so cute.
It's lovely. She does this little like, I know, these like Midwestern style eyes.
Oh my God, yeah, like Tyra Banks would be so proud because she smizes. Or it's like
Tyra would be just like, this is the move.
Yeah.
Like she did it. Right, exactly. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'm going to really fast. Marjorie Taylor Greene put out this horrifying, and like, I'm going to like content warning for transphobia. She put out this horrifying sign that says like, there's only two genders, like male and female. That's the science.
Ugh.
And like science is in air quotes. And also she like tweeted, again, also content warning for transphobia. She like tweeted at Maureen Newman and said like, quote, your biological son, end quote, about Maureen Newman's
awful
trans daughter.
Awful.
Right. It's horrifying. And like, thankfully, the Democratic side of the House has been like pushing really hard about this and like not like letting any of that go. The House passed the Equality Act today, which is like incredible. Very, very excited. That would not have happened if we hadn't kept the House. It's going to pass the Senate. It's going to be signed. It's huge. It's a very big deal. And Maureen Newman is not the only representative who has trans children. One of Pramila Jayapal's children is trans.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Pramila forever.
I love her. She was I don't know that she's in line for it, but I was like, oh, I would love to see her be the next like Speaker of the House. Like once Nancy
she would be so good.
I think she'd be phenomenal. But
yeah, she would be really great. Right. So I forget what I started talking about.
Oh, talking about
volunteers.
Yeah.
Yeah, volunteers are going to experience transphobia. People who are not familiar with the experience of transphobia, which to be clear, I'm cis, so like I am not familiar with transphobia in the way that a trans organizer would be. There are so many trans organizers. It's fantastic. And so like just if your campaign or your full only of people who like don't understand the impact that racism, that transphobia, that homophobia, that like threats of violence, that misogyny is going to have on volunteers, you can't adequately support people and you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
Like a huge part of the job as an organizer is supporting people through talking to voters. If you're not supporting them while they're having those types of experiences, you're not doing your job. And I think that that's like kind of radical to say, which also like it should not be.
So much that maybe is deemed radical or like, oh no, it's a radical perspective. It's funny because it's like I feel like as I've gotten older, I'm like, wait, that's not radical at all. In fact, this is like very reasonable. actually.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, and I think
Exactly.
you touched on this a little bit. I wanna, I know,
Yeah.
like, maybe I don't want to keep you for too long, and I know that, like, it's almost been 2 hours, but this is so great. Like, I'm learning so much, and this is something, especially now with everything that, happened today with Marjorie,
Yeah.
whatever, it's pertinent. But talking about campaigns hiring folks that are disabled or trans, or like are from these like marginalized groups or other things. I think
Yeah.
one of the things that helped this year, and I know you've talked about it on Twitter a lot,
Yeah.
is that since everything had to be remote, it really opened up opportunities for folks who don't have the privilege or capability to like go move somewhere, or where they have to be on
Absolutely.
site. Can you talk a little bit just about like what you hope to see continue, and why that's so important to
Yeah.
disabled folks?
I appreciate that so much that you brought that up. There is very much, or there has been very much, this expectation, like, so let's say you're like working. So I worked for Texas Democrats. I live in California. In a normal time, the expectation would be that I would move to Texas. I would live in Texas for the extent of how long I worked for Texas Democrats. I can't move.
Yeah.
I not only do I have like an established life here. I mean, to be clear, we are like talking about like moving in the future, but like, I physically am not able to like live in one state for 3 months and then like skedaddle on back to my house, and then live in another state for 4 months and skedaddle on back to a different place. One of the reasons for that is something that people don't think about often. Like, there's this idea that like organizers they'll move back in with their parents until they have the next place. I cannot live with my parents.
Yeah.
I'm close with my mom and my sister and my niece, and they all live in the same house, which is great. But it is not a house that's accessible for me. It's in like South Central Texas, which is like a climate that my body cannot function in. I have a very hard time with like extreme heat.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Not great.
Yeah.
Not great. Right. I like physically, it's very, very, very hard for me to do anything when I am like living in an environment with extreme heat. Unless it's like extremely air conditioned. And the reason is that it makes the POTS worse. So it makes my blood flow worse. And then also, at all times, my muscles have to be pretty tight so that they hold my joints in place.
Right.
When it gets warmer, your muscles let go, they loosen, and so all my joints just kind of like.
Oh God. Yeah, I wouldn't even have thought of that, but yeah, it makes a huge impact, I'm sure.
Totally. Right. As well as that, moving is physically taxing. And I have an established medical team here. And anywhere that I live, I have to establish a medical team.
Yeah.
I have a pulmonologist because I have some sort of mystery lung thing that's been going on for like a year and a half now. I have to have a primary care at all times. There are not a lot of specialists around like EDS and POTS, but when I can find them, I need to have them. These sorts of things that like I have to, the first thing I do anytime I move is establish medical care. And it takes months. It's very hard when you are a medically complex person.
Yeah.
Even if you're not, even if you like are not medically complex, it's still really fucking hard.
Oh, yeah.
Health insurance is hard. Finding doctors is hard. Finding doctors who listen to you is harder. Like all of these different things,
like
and then amplified.
Yeah, like finding them in network, whatever. Like I did one move back from New York, and even just finding a psychologist and a psychiatrist and a primary care was like a nightmare.
Exactly.
So, yeah, and so when you have additional needs on top of like regular, it adds so much. The burden is placed on you.
Exactly. And right, because my people absolutely have to have a therapist. and a psychiatrist. But luckily I have one person who's both.
That's
but
what
like
I've been going to recently too. She's this
right,
old
yeah,
Russian lady, and I love it because she's so good.
perfect.
She can tell when I'm bullshitting, and she'll just like sit back and ask questions, and I'm like, oh, I know.
Oh, you know,
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah. So like I can't move somewhere for 3 months.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. Um, right. And I was starting to say I can't move in with my mom because it's not an accessible place for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I am estranged from the other one.
Mm.
The other parent is
Yep.
the source of my PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have that ability.
Yeah.
And so many people do not. And it's absurd that like people just kind of like assume like, oh, you'll live with your parents for 3 months. And I'm like, I no, I
Yeah.
can't do that. And like it's this idea that like there's so much like privileged there's so much like privileged stuff wrapped up in it that
Mm-hmm.
like even for people who have good relationships with their parents, that doesn't mean that their parents have room for them to stay. That doesn't mean their parents can afford for an adult child
Right.
to live with them.
Right.
That like there's all these different levels. Um, parents have a time for them. Like, what if you have a bunch of siblings?
Yeah.
Like right, like it's not sustainable.
Oh, your video froze again. All right, look, we gotta have you go out, like turn it off and turn it back on again. This is how I fix
Okay, I'll do it.
everything. This is how I fix everything.
How about now?
Oh, perfect.
Great.
I know so, like it's funny. My fiance is an engineer, and half the time he's just like, honestly, half the time, like if you just reset it, it's
Yep.
fine. Doesn't require much more. Yeah. But yeah, so well, and I think it's also like it's so presumptuous because yeah, like not everyone like has a safe environment they can go back to at home. Yeah, and other times like their parents don't have the financial resources to support someone like that, and it's coming from such a like place of privilege to assume that that's just something that's going to be available to your workforce, and
yeah.
I mean, it's this the whole same thing with like the idea of unpaid internships, and like it's like no, what if unpaid internships to me just mean like, oh, so you really only want to hire like rich kids or like wealthy kids, because otherwise like people can't afford to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. Right, truly. And then also so like if like digital and distributed organizing didn't exist, I couldn't be an organizer. I do not have the physical ability to canvas. Yep. There are plenty of disabled people who do, but I personally cannot. I can't do it. I faint if I'm on my feet for too long. What'd you say? Oh, because we're in Sacramento, we're fairly close to the Nevada state line. So for the Nevada caucuses last year, we drove to Nevada to canvas, and what we did is the organizer, who was fantastic, was like, okay, so like one of you has to stay like seated, and I was like, yeah, I can like help in the office, or it's like it's gonna be out. There's not gonna be anything in the office. But what you can do is I can give you this like fairly rural turf. You can stay in the car, you can drive, and then Garrett can get out of the car and go and like knock on different doors. And that's what we did, and that worked really well. And that's an example of an organizer being like, yep, like let's figure out what's accessible for you, what works for you.
Right.
And still really valuing our time. And most people had already voted, or like were on their way or whatever, but there was, I think, one or two people who like didn't realize what time they had to be there by, which for a caucus is like crucial, or they won't let you caucus.
Oh yeah.
Caucus and accessibility is like a whole other like 5-hour conversation.
I know. The two other states I went to knock doors was Nevada and Iowa. So I learned a lot about caucusing, both the pros and cons, and
Right. Yeah. So like I don't have the physical ability to go up to doors and door knock. Especially I do okay walking, but standing is like and just like fall over. Which is not ideal. Right. But so being able to be remote was world changing for me. And having the remote options open up was so crucial, including like organizers are expected to work really wild hours, really wild hours that in my own home I am physically able to do because my home is designed around the accessibility needs that I have. Can you still see me okay?
No, it's okay. I was like trying to fix it because the other time when it happened, I was able to just like click and make it work, but
Ooh.
for some reason it's it like went out again. I don't know.
Oh, I'll try it again.
Yeah. Sorry, people watching.
How about
Sorry.
how about now?
Yay! Okay, yeah.
Great.
I mean, we're like wrapping up anyway, but
Yeah.
all good. But yeah, so like,
Right.
but they made it work for you.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can still participate, and also like,
Right.
imagine if the Ossoff campaign and Texas Dems are so lucky to have you as someone like leading their distributed organizing, and that was only because this type of position was made available to you.
Exactly. Something that I say a lot in everything I've ever learned about the like fundamentals of digital and distributed organizing, I learned by being like a queer disabled survivor who was really physically isolated because of my health. So like for the last like, it's kind of weird that like in terms of my like personal life and like where I go, like the last year has not been substantially different in that specific way from like the last 2 years before that because of my health. There are of course like 500,000 other ways that it's different. Right. But in that specific way. And so I was really isolated and like really found community like on Twitter and on Facebook, especially on those two. And I think there's this idea that like digital connections aren't real life. But I'm a real person and you're a real person and we are here speaking and everyone who is listening is a real person. That's real life. That's what it is. It's real. We're here. And so a place where campaigns both sometimes fail and also other campaigns really thrive, like I think Senator Ossoff's campaign really thrived, is in that digital space. There are campaigns that assume that like you can interact the same way digitally that you would on the ground, but it is inherently different. People connect differently across digital space, but some of the basics are still the same. People need to feel seen, they need to feel heard, they need to feel met where they are. And meeting someone where they are digitally is really different than meeting them where they are on the ground. And like everything that I know, everything that I've ever learned about building connections digitally came from being a queer disabled survivor who was like highly isolated physically. Because that's where those like digital connections can really grow. So this idea that like only things that are like in person, in air quotes, is like the only way you can like truly connect with someone is just like so fundamentally false. It's so fundamentally false, and like it is a huge part of why like I think there was this really strange thing that happened in like April, May time when people were like, oh shit, like this is gonna extend. Where like digital organizers and distributed organizers were like not being listened to when like, or like also people would be like, oh, like organizing virtually has like never happened before, and we all were just like, we're right here. We're in the same meeting.
Hello.
You literally pay me to do this. Like we're right. It's here. Like, just like,
hello.
I feel like I could land a plane right here and no one would see me.
So this is this is my job description.
Right, exactly. This is literally what you hired me to do. Right, and so it was just like, no, like there are people who exist who have this knowledge. The first place, if anyone is like, what is she talking about? The first thing that I would do is I would go on Twitter and search. There's this hashtag that's Crip the Vote. It was created by Alice Wong and Andrew Polring, and who are two incredible disabled advocates. And what it's really for is to connect disabled people on topics about voting and politics. And it's exploded. It's like completely organic. It's not their full-time jobs. It just like blew up.
That's so cool.
And like so much organizing happens within. Another really good example, which is still, it's not like national politics, but is state politics, is that originally, I'm in California, originally Governor Newsom said that like disabled people would get vaccinated in this like 1C tier. It's like tier 1 is like people in group facilities, so nursing homes, skilled nursing facilities, people who are incarcerated, and then also people who are homeless, people who are over 75, and then 1B was over 65 and essential workers. And then 1C was supposed to be people between 16 and 64 who are high risk because of their health. And then literally one day, the Newsom just like announced that we were going to go to only age-based after essential workers. Fully only age-based.
Insane.
I'm 27.
Yeah.
Like, right, and I'm sure your partner is also like not 64.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So Alice immediately started a hashtag called High Risk CA, where there were all these folks who were like, I am high risk, like this is very terrifying, like I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
Like that's where we were at, is at that level. And then so I talked with Alice, and Alice and I are good friends. I talked with Alice, and I was like, what I want to do is I want to start responding to every person with info about how they contact Newsom, like about how they contact the administration. And like the tweets about it were so good, and the tweets about it grew like the earned media. Like a lot of news came to Alice, a lot of news to other disability advocates within California. And then like combining that with all this pressure from the ground up towards the administration started to change things. It didn't change them completely, but now like starting on March 5th, there are certain categories of high risk folks who can get vaccinated starting on March 15th. It's still not enough. For example, rare conditions are not included because they're like, we don't have the data. But these sorts of things where like that is a fundamental example of Alice has this whole network, this whole community of disabled people who exist on Twitter, and like some folks of course have like on the ground communities, but like some of us really don't. Some of us really don't because of whatever it may be. And so kind of working in that space of like building and connecting through digital space. And that it can be so effective. And I really think the Ossoff campaign did an incredible job of this, not just on our side, but also with content. That like our TikTok was like, it exploded all the time.
I saw your TikTok stuff. I was so impressed. I mean, that's like one, I mean, even for me, and like I do social media for a living, whatever, like, oh my God, TikTok is that one platform I just like haven't cracked, because you have to be so good. And you guys
our
it.
digital,
it was great.
Right, our digital content team was just like absolutely incredible at that. And then also so there's a lot of like, the output was so engaging. When your output is so engaging, that means that people are engaged, and that's an opportunity. And like that's true for content creators, and it's true for campaigns, and it's true for organizations. That like when you do that, then when you create engaging content, people become engaged. And so then like Shocking. I know like, right, 2 + 2 is 4, but it's still like mind-blowing sometimes. And so there's all that opportunity there. And like if there's not people who like know how to create digital relationships, who know how to create the same feeling that you would get on the ground, but create it through a digital space, that's where there's so much growth potential, and there's so much there that can be filled. And I think like I honestly, like, part of being hired at Texas Democrats, and also hi Ruby,
Hi, Ruby.
and also part of
Hi.
starting for John was that, like, because of being disabled and queer and a survivor who was really physically isolated, I like learned how to connect with people digitally and how to make change digitally. And that's why I'm perpetually, oh, Ruby.
Hey, Ru, come here. Yeah, sorry.
Hi. No, you're good. That's why I fundamentally am like, hire disabled people, hire queer people, hire survivors, hire people of color, hire people who, like, we have this experience not only within our work, but from our actual lives. Like, this is how we've, like, actually built community. We have community. We bring things with us that, like, people who don't have these experiences wouldn't have.
Well, and it's like,
So.
and it also reflects what their electorate looks like. Like,
Exactly.
Your electorate comes in all different shades. It comes with all different body types. Like, it makes sense to hire people who can identify and connect with each
Exactly.
of those populations. You know, it's why wouldn't you want, especially for those populations that maybe like you personally aren't a part of. So
exactly.
you need someone who knows how to connect with them and knows
exactly.
how to engage. So yeah, no, and I shouted out Crypt the Vote. I will continue. Yeah. I think from here on out, I commit to including closed captions.
I love that
on my video, because it's like, this is, again, these are like the types of small, like, is it inconveniencing me at all? Not really. Could it make all the difference in the world to someone? Yeah, it could.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Well, I just, we could go on forever, but I think
know.
both of us, like, we're on California time, so we should probably get some dinner. But like, Tori,
truly,
I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking to me about all of this. I think it's so critical, and as we look forward, I mean, people think like, oh, campaigns only happen on like even years, and it's like, nope, there are campaigns constantly, and there's always room for growth.
Yeah.
And to make them more accessible and inclusive. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much, Tori.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna tweet a small list of people who work in this space.
Oh, awesome.
That I like recommend everyone follow.
Yeah.
So,
and I'll share that so that everyone can see it. And I mean, those that follow me on Twitter, more people follow me on Twitter than here. So yeah. But again, like, thank you so much. You're wonderful. To everyone watching, thanks for joining us. And maybe I'll be online later to rant. Maybe I won't. You'll just have to find out.
Relatable.
All right.